kmfm with Kenward Trust drug and alcohol treatment and rehabilitation programs.
All this week we are teaming up with Kenward Trust, who have an alcohol and drug treatment centre in Maidstone. We've been visiting schools across Kent and we've been joined by Andy, a former drug and alcohol addict. Andy has been sharing his story with the students, so let's hear where it all started.
I was an intravenous drug user. So that's heroin and crack cocaine for 20 years. And I used to be a beggar on the London Underground. So I used to beg for my money and all them kind of circumstances. Did it start off in that situation? No, it never started off in that situation. Where it started off for me is in a little park at the back of the little school that I went to, you know, and I used to kind of like miss off lessons, skip off lessons, go over into the park, and my mate, he used to kind of have an older brother and he would get hold of some cannabis. And we would go over that little park and we would smoke that cannabis. And in that haze of cannabis, that's where my life started to sort of change. Initially, at the beginning, it was sniffing solvents. So it was solvent abuse, stuff like that. For me, I was always quite curious about things. My problem was more than anything is that in my own self, I wasn't really that confident. I was a little bit shaky, I was a little bit jittery, especially around people who I felt were older than me and seemed to have it going on in their life. Seemed to be achieving things, seemed to be getting on. And I would always be measuring myself to somebody else. He's getting this, he's got the girl, he seems to be getting on in life, he seems to be doing all them sorts of things what I thought was right that I couldn't. So when I bumped into this substance, which was cannabis for me initially, I didn't really initially enjoy what I was doing, but I was doing it because I didn't really want to lose face in what was going on around me. And I just started to feel kind of like I would want to be a part of that. I wanted to be involved in that. It made me sort of kind of mysterious in some ways because I was involved in these drug things and I could sell a little bit of drugs, I could make a little bit of money and things. And really what started to happen for me, I started to spiral. I got asked to leave school over a period of time down to my glue sniffing. I had to generate about £120 a day, every day. No days off, no Sunday or Saturday off or anything like that. Every day I needed to find that money. And how I found that money was through crime. That's why I have such a long criminal record, because I wasn't very good at it. But also that I used to sell drugs for other people. It wasn't my drugs. I used to run around with mouthfuls of crack cocaine for other people and sell them from my mouth, because the area that I was in, there was a chance of being jumped on. So I used to have it in my mouth and serve it from my mouth, just to make lots of really crazy, daft choices. So I left school and I couldn't spell words like because, couldn't spell words like boat, and I couldn't write my name properly. My address, oh, that was a nightmare. Where I live with my mum's house, yeah, I used to write it on my hand, because everywhere you go, you get a form with your name, with your address on it. They would say, well, you haven't filled that bit in. So I learnt just to cause a scene all the time. And if I cause a scene, no one ever really wants to talk to me then. When I went back to my mum's house, many, many years after all drinking and drug taking and everything like that, I met my mum. She's like 90 years of age, my mum. And like when I came down the path, she was like a teenager dancing in the kitchen. She was really happy to see me. I've come in the house. She's sitting there. She had a little tea, a few little cakes and that. And she started to cry. And she said to me, I said, what's the matter, mum? Why are you crying? Why? She said that when the phone used to ring, her stomach used to drop. She told me that when she used to go to the phone and pick the phone up, it always started, is that Mrs. Watson? And she would say, everything about me would drop, because they would say, this is the school, can you come up and get him? Or he's been sent home, or it's the police station, or we've got him down the hospital and he's in the hospital, he's had an accident, something's happened. She said every time her stomach used to drop. And she said to me she used to lay by a radio at night time, listen, and she would hear that someone had been fished out the river, someone had been beaten up in the high street. She said, I used to think that was you, Andrew. I didn't realise the impact that I was having on my mum. And I always thought my mum was quite brave, because she would come up the school and she would come up the police station, in the hospital. But I didn't realise how much she was going through and what was happening to her until I sat in her kitchen. But I didn't sit in her kitchen until I was about 33 years of age. I'd been missing for about 10 years because I stole money from her. And when I stole money from her, it got to the stage where she said, "You've got to go. You can't stay here no more." And she had tears in her eyes when she said, "You've got to go." And I can remember giving her the front door key. And when I gave her that front door key, I fell into the land of bed-sit world, sleeping on people's floors, sleeping round the back of shops, sleeping in places where I really shouldn't have been in. Yeah, and I was in a state, and I didn't really realise how much of a state I was in. But the only thing that seemed to keep me going was to keep taking drink or drugs, because I didn't think there was a way out of all this. So over a while, as I was away and kind of doing the things that I was doing, I'd wake up around people's houses, and some parents were quite friendly, and they'd say, "You can come and stay here," and then I'd stay with my mate and all that. But I had light fingers, because I always needed to get something or fund something. So I would end up stealing from the people that helped me, like my mum, who loves me, who brought me up, wiped my bottom, powdered my bottom, put me new clothes on my back when I was a little boy and saw me tottering about. There I am, vomiting extremities and swearing at my mum just because I need £10 to go and buy some drugs. And I didn't understand that. And eventually what it came down to is I couldn't go near my mum's house anymore because she got an order and things happened, and I couldn't go there because every time I went there something would happen and the police would come and I'd get dragged away and all that stuff. That's my mum. Yeah, that's the person who really looks after me and cares for me. I fell into this world of craziness, and that went on for many times, many trips to prison. You hear a lot of people say, "I'm not going to go back to taking drugs again when I get out of here. When that prison door opens, yeah, I'm going to go back and get myself a job. I'm going to sort myself out, find myself a girlfriend. I'm going to be all right. Things are going to happen." With me, when I was in jail, and nearer it was getting to that prison date of release, I could feel my anxiety coming again, because I knew I was going to come out that door and I was going to go and more or less do exactly the same thing that I always did. And prison officers always have a bit of a joke in the reception before you get released from prison. They always say to you, "Right, see you again soon then, your cell will be waiting for you." But I was always quite certain that I was going to return back. And that's why I just ended up going to prison so many times. I'm no big-time gangster, mate. You know, I was a really low-life bottom criminal, really, who was caught up in a lot of pain and got himself in a lot of trouble down to making silly choices. Well, eventually, I met Karen, and that was my partner. And eventually, she fell pregnant, and my son was born 8 weeks premature. He was born addicted to heroin, to crack cocaine, to methadone, and he would shake. I got the chance to cut the umbilical cord. And that's supposed to be the greatest moment of being a father. And I've cut the cord, and I've seen Jamie, and he's really small. He's no bigger than a bag of sugar. He's really small. And they've taken him away and taken him downstairs into the special baby care unit, because obviously he needs to have some help about all the things that he's addicted to. And while he's in there, it starts to dawn on us that social services, and we're not going to get to see him. Because, you know, where we were living, there was no carpet. It was just cider bottles and plastic bits of tin foil, and it was just a crazy place. It wasn't anything homely about it. So there was no way that my son could come to that circumstances. When he was born, our remedy to that, we ended up in the disabled toilet in the hospital. We ended up shooting up some heroin in the toilet. Karen's gone over. She's collapsed and she's laying on the floor now. I try and get her into a recovery position. I'm throwing water on her face. The security guard's banging on the door and I'm trying to bring her around. That's the day that my son is born. She come round. We come out of there. But obviously, police had been called. I was wanted. And what happens on that journey? I'll get away, but eventually the police catch up with me at a later date. I end up in Belmarsh prison. Karen, she went off to somewhere, off to try and find some support and help, but never managed to find the help there. Not that the help weren't there, she just wasn't willing to take what was on board. And she would get to see Jamie once or twice. But what happened to Karen, she went and brought some drugs one day from someone which were stronger than what they normally were. She's taken them drugs and she's passed away. And she's collapsed in this so-called home. Who do you think the people who come round and found her? Her mum and dad. Wonder what it's like to find your daughter in that sort of circumstances and how you'd feel. Who do you think gets the blame in that circumstances? That's it. I got the blame because of all what went on. Now, that wasn't my fault what happened there, but I was blamed for that. Now, my son was in social services care. He ended up being in a house somewhere where there was some abuse went on. Who put my son in that situation at that time? How did I get myself involved in that? Is where the love of my life, everything which I ever really wanted to be. I wanted to be a father. I never had a father really, and all I wanted to be was be a father. But you know what? A substance had become more important to me than my own son. I was in prison. I got released from prison. I got back into taking drugs and crazy things, and I found myself at the bottom of the escalators again, begging for my money. But there was a lady who used to come all the time, and she used to come to me, and she used to come with a ham sandwich, cup of tea, and she used to sit down next to me, and she would say to things like me, Andy, it ain't got to be like this. You haven't got to be living life like this. Something can change. And some days I would tell her to get on her bike. Some days I would let down my guard and I would say yeah to her, come on, yeah, okay then. Well, she eventually got me into a detox unit. Yeah, and I've been in detoxes and treatment places and all sorts of things before, but this time I was really in a position of complete addict. I had nowhere to live, and I went into this hospital. I didn't really know where I was and that, and they started to take me off of all these drink and drugs and everything like that. And I cleaned up. And then what happened is over a period of time they kept trying to find me to be able to go somewhere, and they'd ring round hostels and all that, and they would say, we're not having him here. Last time he was here, threw the chair through the window. Last time he's tried to smuggle some gal in. Not because of any other reason other than just the chaotic of what was going on for me. So they couldn't find anyone. Someone come and did a 1 hour bank shift in that hospital. And I spoke to them a little bit about my background. I spoke to them about Kenward, because I'd been in Kenward at one time on my journey, and it was somebody who had worked for Kenward. And I spoke to them, and they said, I might know somebody who might be able to take you in, may be able to help you. And what happened, the next day, this bloke came up. He was about 23 years of age. He drove up to the hospital. His name was John. He came up to the hospital and he said, you can live in my house. You can come and live in my house. So when someone says that, you can come and live in my house, I think, oh yeah, I'm going to come and live in your house. Excellent, because I had nowhere else to go. It was the pavement for me. He drove me back to his house. It was in the city estate. I've got back there. I knew there was prostitution, drug dealing and all that going on all around the area. I knew what the area was all about. But for me, something had gone on. Something was going on for me. And I've turned up there. I've met his wife called Tamsin. They've taken me in there into their kind of like living room. I've seen the DVD player, saw the telly, saw some other things in the room. I thought, I'm going to try that, I'm just going to steal it. It was quite late by this time. They took me up to a little box room upstairs. I went in the box room, it had like a white duvet on the bed. I was already quite tidy from the hospital, but it was my own little stuff. And I can remember I sat down on the bed and I laid down on that duvet and I fell asleep. And I can tell you that's the best time of sleep that I've had for ages. It was like I'd come to a place, it's making me all shiver now, because what I'm talking to you about is reality. And at that moment, when I laid down on that bed, everything sort of like just felt like I was in cotton wool, comfortable. And I laid there, I fell asleep, I had the best night's sleep that I could have. And I got up in the morning and I come back down the stairs, and John and Tamsin were sitting around their little table in the kitchen, and they had their shreddy wheat and their milk and all that kind of thing on the table. And John said to me, come and sit down. And I sat down and they poured out the milk on the shreddy wheat, and I sat there like that. And John said to me, he said, open your hands up. And I opened my hands up like that. He put a set of front door keys right to his house, to his car, to everything he owned in my hand. When he did that, I snapped. Everything about me just broke instantly. And do you know what, right? That was years and years ago. But something actually happened to me. And what it was a demonstration of trust. And in an impact of trust, something dramatically changed in my life. Just because somebody showed me a bit of trust, they had a bit of belief that I could achieve something, I could move on, I could achieve like exams. So much stuff happened after that. And I took hold of that and I lived with that couple for 18 months in that house. And like I learnt to kind of be in at meal times, start to eat, have a bit of structure to my life. Everything started to happen. From there onwards, my wife today, she used to help prisoners find accommodation. And I ended up meeting my wife there. And I got married to my wife, and I've been married to my wife. She had a beautiful daughter, so I became a father to her daughter from about the age of 2. And she's now 17 years of age. And do you know what? I got reunited with my son. When I got reunited with my son, that was about 2 years later. For 18 months I had to write a letter every Saturday, and I wrote that letter and I drew pictures of like trees, pictures of castles with smiley faces, all that sort of stuff, and I used to have to send it to this guardian, a light she was called, and she would send it to the people who were looking after my son. And over a period of time I got 1 hour's contact with my son. And when I got that 1 hour's contact with my son, that was one of the most amazing experiences going. My son's now 18, sixth form, same age, doing well, getting on. He's going to do drama and going up to kind of do education, and that's what he wants to do. Where Jamie was living was Iris and Roy's, Karen's mum and dad, who had lost their daughter. So you can imagine what kind of relationship. It was very difficult. But you know what? A few years ago, I went and had a meal with Iris and Roy. And we all sat round the table and we had something to eat and all that. And you know what? I shook his hand, and he's like an old army sort of bloke. He's quite, stern. And I shook his hand and he squeezed my hand. And he had my hand, and I thought, well, is he going to let go of my hand? And he said to me, I don't really forgive what went on, but you just keep carrying on doing what you're doing. I tell you what, when I got them words from there, that was amazing. Now I'm in contact, we ring each other up and we talk to each other, and my son's growing up. So I used to see him every week and then go on holidays and have trips with him, and he still rings up, he comes up on the train, sees us, all sorts of things now. What drugs do to you, they rob you from that opportunity of being able to look and making a rational decision. That's my experience of drug taking. When I got caught up in it, I'd lost the opportunity of choice about what I wanted to do. I was being propelled by something else other than what, the decisions that I wanted. I spent years in prison, in Her Majesty's prison. This is an invitation to Buckingham Palace, to a garden party. When I went to Buckingham Palace, I put on my best suit, got a new suit and all that, and tie and all that, and went off to the palace and everything like that. When I got up there, I'd eaten prison food. Sausages you could bounce on the floor, mashed potato which had black bits in it, gravy, which I'm telling you, when you pour it on the food, it's the most strangest gravy. I don't know what they make it out of, but it's not very nice. There I am in the palace, all dressed up in my suit and everything, and I'm getting cakes with crowns on them and stuff like that, and drinks where they're doing iced teas out of these, and I'm standing in the Buckingham Palace gardens. It was a lovely blue sky, a lovely blue day and all that, and I thought to myself, I had to keep pinching myself. And do you know what? I have to pinch myself today standing here, because it's an absolute privilege to be come out and be able to speak to young people about making right choices. And that's what all this is really about. The choices that we choose to make.
A massive thank you to Andy for sharing his story on KMFM all of this week. And if you think you know somebody who might benefit from speaking to Kenward Trust, visit thinkdifferentlykent.co.uk.